right there in the dining room I paid for. My father launched his poison across the mahogany table. "You and that boy are just heavy cargo dragging the ship down." My mother grinned, bobbing her head like she'd been praying for this insult to finally land.
Yeah, the cruel gag.
They were feasting on steaks from my fridge, lounging in a home financed by my salary. I didn't weep. I didn't blink. I locked eyes with him and stated, "You have exactly 24 hours to get out." The quiet was suffocating. However, what they failed to realize was that I had been sharpening my blade for this specific showdown long before supper started. I need to explain the history here. My household never appeared fractured to the public eye. We were that clan beaming too brightly in holiday cards, the type neighbors assumed had conquered life. My mom baked heavy cakes for charity drives. My dad slapped backs like a mayor at town halls. And my brother, oh my dear brother, he was the chosen prince. Every conversation revolved around Julian, his grand design, his upcoming empire. Conversely, I was the silent shadow, the insurance policy, the one required to mend the nets when the ropes snapped. That evening at dinner wasn't an isolated event. It was decades in production, woven from a million tiny lacerations. I recall being young, balancing barefoot on the freezing linoleum of our pantry, hearing my mom hum while she mixed a pot of stew. She smelled of vanilla and bleach. She appeared so typical, yet she wielded this unspoken law in every stare. Don't splash the water. Don't ask why. Tribe above all. Even if it meant the tribe flourished while you withered. That law became my prison. By the time I turned 16, I fully understood my rank. Julian could total a sedan and Dad would chuckle. Young men need speed. I scored a 98 in chemistry. And Mom's only remark was, "Don't stress yourself. Elena, not everyone can blaze like Julian." I used to lay awake in my quarters, gazing at plastic galaxies I taped to the plaster, questioning if anyone even saw me past what I could sacrifice for their comfort. Jump ahead a decade, I had a child of my own.
Leo, my compass, my evidence that existence could offer more than letdowns.
He is 12 today, brilliant, gentle, still naive enough to trust in goodness. I swore a quiet oath the morning he arrived, wrapped in clinic flannel, clutching my thumb with that fragile grip. I would never permit him to feel transparent. Perhaps that is why the meal struck me so deeply. He was upstairs, likely pressing his ear against the carpet, hearing his grandfather shred my dignity, hearing his grandmother's mute approval cut just as sharply. What sort of heritage was I delivering if I allowed that toxin to infect his spirit? Too? The property they mocked me inside, that belonged to me. I earned it. Endless evenings in the firm, code audits that bled into dawn, consecutive conferences, where I had to demonstrate double the value just to be acknowledged. I cemented every stone of that sanctuary on compromises nobody in my lineage ever queried. Yet they rested there, cutlery screeching on stoneware, drinking vintage reds from goblets I purchased, acting as if my toil and exhaustion were their birthright. And the reality is, this wasn't the debut incident. The requests arrived in tides. "Can you cover the lease this season? Your father's sedan failed inspection again. Julian just requires initial capital. He is inches from a monopoly." Initially, I convinced myself it was fleeting. A stage, blood-supporting blood. But fleeting morphed into rhythm. Rhythm morphed into requirement. And requirement morphed into shackles. I learned to identify the pitch in Mom's vocals when she rang. Strained. Scripted, like she had memorized her monologue before connecting. Dad never requested, he insisted. Julian naturally was always too occupied to beg personally. He let them handle the gritty labor, while he sold venture capitalists on the same hollow fantasy he had been repackaging since university. But I nodded yes continuously because declining made me feel like the greedy villain. And every instance I promised myself this is the finale. It never was. That is the context you require. By the time you witness someone like me look her parent in the face and inform him he has one day to vacate, comprehend it is not a singular flash of bravery. It is the mass of years crushing down until something eventually fractures. And what fractured wasn't my rage. It was my tolerance. The collapse didn't arrive abruptly. It seeped in like smoke under a sealed jam. You don't smell it initially, but gradually the haze covers everything. It commenced with a ring. My mom's contact glowed on my display just as I was locking my workstation at the agency. For a second I paused. Calls from her never signaled joy. Regardless, I accepted, clinging to that microscopic fragment of optimism that perhaps this round it would just be a standard hello. Her tone was vibrating, but I recognized the cadence. I had heard it 1,000 times. The theater of a lady performing her tragedy. "Elena," she grasped, "your dad. He requires an operation." They claim his valves might fail if we don't move immediately. And the estate, well, it is dire. We are underwater. 400,000. The lender is promising eviction. I pushed my knuckles against the glass wall of my suite, observing the metropolis smear into streaks. I desired to trust her, but I had visited this coordinate before. Massive figures, blurry specifics, and consistently the identical plea. Rescue us. I will host supper, I replied eventually. Bring Dad, bring Julian, we will discuss. All of us. The pause on her side stretched a second too long, like she hadn't anticipated me to require eye contact, but she consented. That evening, after Leo was dreaming, I sat at my granite island and drafted all regulations onto a yellow pad. Documentation, no insults toward my boy. No currency without proof. Terminate the gathering if necessary. I hid the paper under my saucer like a shield. Still, skepticism gnawed at me. I dialed Chloe, my ally, who had guided me through every hurricane since orientation. We convened at a bistro on 4th Avenue, our standard table by the glass. She was already twirling a pen between her thumbs when I appeared. They are fabricating, she stated bluntly after I unleashed the facts. Maybe not, I countered softly. Elena, wake up. No files, no integers, no medical invoices. They desire donations. You cannot bleed for humans who would let you dry out. Her phrasing scorched because I knew it was accurate. She leaned nearer, her tone whispered. Record the feast. Washington is one-party consent. If this turns hostile, you will possess evidence. Don't let them warp your narrative twice. I agreed. My gut nodded and vowed to myself I would heed her counsel. The following afternoon crawled. My anxiety was tender, every watch hand loud like a drum. When the dusk arrived, I arranged the setting with surgical exactness. 4 dishes, 4 stems. The linens creased perfectly. The pond outside glistened under the deck lamp. Motionless as oil, as if holding its lung, Leo sat on the sofa with his algebra scattered out like a fortress. I leaned down and smoothed a lock of hair from his brow. Tonight is an adult evening, I informed him. You will sleep at Harper's, no debates. He circled his eyes but agreed, accustomed to these abrupt shifts. When the rap finally sounded, it struck like a boulder in my ribs. My mom stepped in first. Limbs loaded with casserole like this was some relaxed picnic. Dad dragged behind, slighter than I recalled, but his gaze still held that iron severity. Julian strutted in last, mobile vibrating in his grip, a grin pulling at his mouth like he already realized he would conquer. We sat for a few minutes. My mom stuffed the quiet with memories, chatting about ancient holidays, old residents, her macaroni formula. But I wasn't charmed. It was the identical strategy she had always utilized. Soften the borders before the dagger. I interrupted her. Let's view the statements, the clinic costs, the notices from the mortgage firm. Show me what we are managing. Her beam stumbled. My dad's pupils shifted. Julian cleared his throat, adjusting in his chair. There isn't paperwork, my mom whispered. Finally, her pitch strained. You will just have to believe us. Believe, that term landed like a punch, because belief was the pistol they had fired all my existence. Believe us when we drained your tuition savings. Believe us when Julian's venture crashed. Believe us when you labored 2 shifts to satisfy the collectors. Julian leaped in, selling his newest scheme with the zeal of a carnival barker. It is going to shift the paradigm, Elena, blockchain gaming. You work in systems, you understand. We just require a small boost to get it airborne. I stared at him, my muscles locked. He had utilized my own profession against me. Like waving a prize he knew I would never desire to hunt. And then my father snapped. He pounded his palm on the surface, vibrating the cutlery. You earn $400 a year, Elena. How can you rest there and observe your lineage drown? My mother's tone was quieter but more slicing. Oh, Leo is a handful too. Don't you wish for him to know his origins? That was the boundary that nearly finished me. Dragging my boy into their deficit, their maneuvering, their infinite appetite. My palms trembled under the wood, but my speech emerged steady, almost too steady. I know, I will not mortgage my son's destiny to scrub up your errors. Not again. Julian laughed, his visage warping. You're just acting the martyr. You got fortunate. That is all. Some of us possess genius. Some of us just survive. The chamber smeared around me. My mother's glare calcified. My father's knuckles whitened. Their vocals climbed in a symphony of blame, disgrace, sin, and then Julian's slip. His phrases tumbled out quicker than his mind could arrest them. The debt, most of it is mine. Mom and Dad just supported me. The atmosphere went static. My mother's complexion drained of pigment. My father glanced away. And in that second, I realized this wasn't about a residence or an operation. It was about Julian. It had consistently been about Julian. My mother's eyes sparked with something perilous. "If you don't assist, I will go public," she spat. "I will inform everyone what type of girl you are. I will drag Leo into it if I have to." The danger sliced through me like frost. She was prepared to utilize my kid as ammunition. That is when something inside me locked into position. Frigid, elusive, absolute. "You have 24 hours, I repeated, stable as rock. The quiet that ensued was heavier than any shout. And in that quiet, I comprehended this wasn't merely a domestic quarrel anymore. This was combat. After they marched out that evening, the villa was too still, not tranquil, vacant. I could detect the faint buzz of the chiller, the pulse of the wall timer, but it all felt acute, like ambient static slicing through my torso. I piled their ignored dishes into the basin one by one. Each rattle of ceramic against metal was a souvenir of how much of myself I had burned attempting to keep this clan swimming. I should have felt release. But instead, I felt something denser, mourning. Not for them, for the mirage. Upstairs, Leo's lamp was still shining. He had returned from Harper's just before they departed. He perched on his mattress, legs folded, drawing spaceships in his binder. When I walked in, he didn't even glance up. "Did they go?" he inquired softly. "Yes," I stated. "For good?" I hesitated. We will see." He didn't reply, just continued sketching. A rough starship with fire blasting from the thrusters. I kissed the crown of his skull, compelling my tone to be firm. "You don't have to stress. I have got us." But I knew those phrases were just as much for me as they were for him. The subsequent dawn, my device vibrated endlessly. Not rings, alerts. My gut dropped when I viewed it. Tick-tock. My mother in total theatrical mode, her weeping tracking flawlessly down her cheeks. She wailed into her lens about the icy offspring who had deserted her elders in their moment of ruin. She displayed pictures of me and Leo in front of our Portland estate, framed like proof of my greed. The keywords were brutal, ungrateful, daughter, family, traitor, heartless. I scrolled through remarks until my fingers twitched. Outsiders dissected me like they understood me. Some pitied my folks, others shredded me. How can she do that to her own DNA? Poor dad. Imagine being evicted by your girl. That kid deserves superior. That kid, Leo, my ribs tightened. If she pulled him into this circus, he would be mocked at campus before he even knew what treason was intended to signify. By noon, the clip had passed 100,000 loops. By supper, 500,000. My colleagues peeked at me diagonally in the studio, murmurs drifting behind me like ghosts. My director summoned me in, his tone gentle but invasive. "Is everything stable at home, Elena? Do we need to be conscious of issues?" I smiled tightly, lied, claimed it was under command.
Internally, I was incinerating.
Chloe didn't pause for me to ring. She dragged me into our booth at the coffee shop, her ultrabook already active. "Save everything," she ordered. Captures, URLs, time codes. This isn't just theater anymore. It is libel. Her pitch was quiet but savage. They desire a crusade on your character. Good. Then, you battle it with documentation. So I did. I harvested every fragment of proof, her upload, the replies, the messages that would shortly arrive. By the conclusion of the evening, I possessed a virtual binder titled Litigation. It felt sterile, robotic, but it also felt like shielding. The ensuing days smeared. My father transmitted texts pleading for just a tiny bridge loan. Julian posted his own clips, twisting the chronicle into a fable where I had sabotaged his ambitions for decades. My mother escalated with more fake weeping, implying things about my separation, about Leo's fractured home. But in the center of the hurricane, Sarah rang, my property attorney. Her voice was balanced, calm in the disorder. "There is a clause in your parents' deed," she stated. 2 years ago, they refinanced. It is in default. The lender can vend to any eligible purchaser without their approval. If you desire the property out of their grasp, Elena, now is your window. For the initial time in weeks, I sensed air in my chest. A path out, not just shielding, but striking. The verdict arrived rapidly. I collected assets, authorized Sarah to proceed. Within days, the transaction was active. The East Side bungalow, the identical structure where my tuition account had evaporated into Julian's pipe dream, was about to become mine. It wasn't just land. It was a signal. When the documents cleared, Sarah drafted formal warnings. My parents and Julian had one day to exit or brave legal results. She also mailed a cease and desist order to my mother regarding the social videos. Julian reacted with fury, his chats full of slurs, naming me a defector. My father attempted negotiating, proposing fractional payments he couldn't possibly supply. My mother doubled down online, her disciples cheering her on, but their volume no longer stabbed the way it used to. I employed a sanitation squad, swapped the bolts, and paced through the east side home like a coroner analyzing an ancient injury. The atmosphere smelled of grime and remorse. In the loft, they discovered a battered crate hidden beneath holiday decorations and busted gear. Inside, my grandfather's original testament, savings logs, a note addressed to me. My respiration caught as I flattened the paper. His script was trembling but legible. The capital is for Elena's schooling. No one else's vision. No one else's liabilities. Water smeared the sheet. Evidence. Validation. After years of being portrayed as the greedy one, I added it to the dossier. My weaponry expanded. Meanwhile, Leo attempted to maintain his standard rhythm. Sports drills, biology tasks. His lens aimed at the constellations, but he heard the gossip at instructions. He questioned me one dusk. Why does Grandma loathe us? My throat constricted. She doesn't loathe you, I stated carefully. She just selected paths that damaged us. And when humans are hurting, occasionally they attempt to pull others down with them. He nodded gradually, too wise for 12. Then he returned to sketching thrusters, his graphite scraping the page like it could delete the mass in the chamber. That night, I sat isolated on the rear deck, gazing at the pool's mirrored skin. I reflected on every offering I had produced, every limit I had swallowed, and I realized I was finished playing goalkeeper. My mother desired to command the tale. My brother desired to revise it. My father desired to guilt me into mute compliance. But I finally possessed the one item they couldn't distort, the reality written in die, signed by the man who had trusted in me more than anyone else. The next time they returned, I would be prepped. Not with open limbs, with contracts, with truth, with the density of every quiet scar transformed into iron. This time the judgment would be mine to serve. Terminals are weird locations for finales. People conceive of them as origins, vacations, fresh careers, reunions. But for me, the Portland Gate became a tribunal without barriers. Their jet home touched down late afternoon. I stood just past the safety barrier, Sarah beside me. A binder tucked neatly under her elbow. The scent of grease and kerosene flooded the zone. A monitor above the door blared silent reports, but all I detected was the hammer of my veins. First came Julian, marching off the bridge like a male returning from conquest, his device already in palm, his mouth twitching in some partial sneer. Behind him, my mom gripped a neck cushion, her visage arranged in a show of exhaustion. She must have rehearsed the whole flight. My dad trailed last, moving slower now, but his pupils scanning, calculating. They located me instantly. My mother's face ignited, but not with affection, with the joy of someone about to turn the blade. She stepped ahead. Elena, thank God you're here. We knew you would soften. I didn't budge. Sarah stepped forward, composed and exact, and extended 3 stiff packets. Consider yourselves notified. Perplexity washed over their features. Julian ripped his open first, his vision tracking the terms until the circulation drained from his skin. He looked up, tone harsh, cracking the brittle piece of the lobby. You purchased the estate? Tear. Yes, I stated, my tone balanced. It is mine now. Legally, you have no right. And if you don't exit by the limit, the deputies will compel it. My father's jaw locked. My mother blinked, paralyzed. Passengers decelerated around us, intrigued. A small kid pulled his mother's jacket and whispered, "What is occurring?" Julian's decibels climbed, desperate to grab command of the story. You are a crook. You have been against me since day one. Always envious, always attempting to ruin me. I stepped nearer, my voice quiet but sharp enough to slice. You mean since you pilfered my tuition account? Since you vowed the universe and left me sleeping on rugs while you played genius? Gas rippled from observers nearby, though they didn't know the specifics. They could sense the gravity. Julian attempted to hold my stare, but his pupil shifted. My mother jumped in, her tone vibrating just enough to sound genuine. We did it for the tribe, Elena, for you. You have become so frigid. Can't you view? We only desired to exist. I pulled a creased note from my purse, the one my grandfather had drafted me. I displayed it. The sheet aged but steady in my grip. This was never yours to burn. He left it for me, for my learning, and you distorted his faith into your alibi. For once, her weeping froze before it could drop. My dad stepped ahead, his pitch thundering, attempting to regain his dominance. That is sufficient. You don't shame your blood in public. I squared my frame. You did that yourselves. Every falsehood, every loan, every menace to pull my boy into your disaster that concludes today. Something fractured in his gaze. Not regret.
not yet, but terror.
Terror of the one thing they had never anticipated, my rejection to fold. Sarah spoke again, her inflection corporate, untouched. You have been warned. Further contact outside of court avenues will be deemed stalking. Violating the decree will result in instant escalation. A ring had shaped around us. Now strangers pretending not to view while openly eavesdropping. Mobiles discreetly tilted, capturing. The shame they had once utilized against me was now theirs to bear. Julian detonated, his vocals raw. You will rue this. You think you are superior to us because you got lucky. You will be zero without family. I stepped in close enough that only he could hear. I already am superior because I chose not to become you.